So this is my last video for the England part of my trip. I went to Bath, Salisbury, Stonehenge, Bournemouth, Southampton, and Poole. And all of these places were beautiful. From Oxford, I went to the Bath area. I took a bus. I took 4 buses from Oxford to the Bath area. It took a little over 4 hours, almost 5 hours. And in hindsight, I should have taken a train. Didn't know. And if you've seen my transportation or public transport video that I did while I was in England, I got lots of nice comments about just this topic that, maybe you should have taken a train. Yes, I probably should have. It would have been quicker and less hassle. So, live and learn. And I hope people who are going to be visiting England watch that one and learn more about the public transport system than I knew, because I'd researched it a little bit, but I didn't even know what to look for. So all the comments have been very helpful, and I appreciate everybody who's left a helpful comment about the lingo, about how the trains and buses work, because I could have used that information for sure. When I got to the Bath area, I stayed in an Airbnb south of Bath, which was a lovely historic building. It was cold, but it was March and, the outside temperature was cold. It was just a little different, but I got used to it and it was a nice place to stay. I took a bus into Bath and I walked around. It was a beautiful city, lots of lovely architecture. I visited the Roman baths. I went there and did the tour, and that was very, very interesting. All the history and everything. I think I heard, don't quote me on this, that the architecture there is from the Regency era. I'm not sure. I don't know my history of England or Europe well at all. So I apologize. Again, I should have done more research, but it was a lovely place. There were a lot of tourists, but it wasn't crowded. It didn't feel like another place I'll talk about when I do my Ireland video. But I really enjoyed my day in Bath, and I was told by a kind person I met in a cafe near the Airbnb to have a Bath bun if I was going to go to Bath. And I asked what it was, and she said it was a specialty dessert that Bath is known for. So I found a place, Sally Lunn Buns, I believe it was called. And Sally Lunn, L-U-N-N, was a real person, and she opened this eatery, I believe. And so I had a Bath bun, and I had lemon curd on the top of mine, and it was delicious. It was like no other pastry I'd ever had, and it was huge. I'll show a picture of it. It was big around, and I thought, I'm not going to be able to eat all this. And the waitress said, yes, you will. It's very light. And it was. It was kind of like a brioche bread, but slightly sweet, and it was delicious. It was kind of a melt in your mouth type dessert pastry. It was wonderful. So I'd recommend, if you ever go to Bath, England, to have a Bath bun. My next stop in England, I went from Bath down to the Southampton area, and I rode a train. That was the first train I rode from Trowbridge to Southampton. And it was much faster. It was, it went through the countryside instead of on roads. So of course it was faster, and I got to see quite a few small towns and the, pastures and green grass and rolling hills. It was really pretty. The day I got to Southampton, I sort of just took it easy because travel is hard. It's hard for an old lady, and I enjoyed it, but I was, I was there about 2 weeks at this point or thereabouts, and I was really tired. most of the time. So some days I just kind of hung out at the hotel, or I would walk to a grocery store, to see what they had and maybe buy something to eat, maybe just buy a candy bar. I brought home quite a few candy bars that were different that we don't have here. And the next day, after I got to Southampton, I had contacted a Facebook friend that I'd known from online, and he came to the hotel and picked me up, and we went to have coffee, and then we drove to the New Forest. And it was beautiful. I'd seen the New Forest on a map, but I didn't know anything about it. It's part of the National Park System. I'm not sure what they call it in England, but it was gorgeous. And he knew all about the area. He lived there in Southampton. So it was really nice to hear local things, from somebody who was willing to talk to me, because I would, strike up conversations with people. But this guy, he, it was like talking to a friend, which was great. And he told me all about, the area, just how things are done. I got to ride in a car, and I'm sitting on the left side, but there's no steering wheel. He was over there on the right side with the steering wheel. It was just different. It was interesting. And it was totally different than riding in a bus. So I'm glad I had that experience too. At the New Forest, there were horses and ponies and donkeys just wandering around, and evidently my friend said that people own them, but they get to graze on this land, and they were pretty much tame, but I didn't pet any of them. I think I might have petted a nose of a horse or something that was on the other side of a fence. We went to a small town. I'm not sure the name of it at this point, but it was where the real Alice in Wonderland was buried. And the person, Lewis Carroll, who wrote the Through the Looking Glass books, had been telling a story to a real girl, and then he had it published. So I didn't know any of that. I thought it was just a made-up story, but it was a made-up story, but for a real girl. And that real girl was buried in a churchyard. We visited the grave, and I'll put a picture here of that. The next day, in Southampton, I went to the Tudor House. My friend had recommended it, and I don't know much about English history at all, but it was very interesting. And the guide, I don't know if he was an employee or a volunteer, nice young man. He was so knowledgeable. He should have been teaching history. Maybe he does. It was a Sunday, so maybe he does during the week. I don't know. But it was a wonderful tour, and we got to see how people lived back in that time. Then, the next day, a friend of mine had taken a cruise from the U.S. to Southampton. So I met her, and we got together and spent about 4 days together. We took a train to Bournemouth. And while we were there, we walked to the ocean almost every day, I think every day. We went to Salisbury, and from there up to Stonehenge. That was quite an experience. Salisbury was a beautiful town. We both kind of wished we had stayed there a night or two, because there was so much to see that we only had about an hour and a half, I guess, before the bus from Salisbury up to Stonehenge was going to leave. So we just went to one church, St. Thomas. I'm not sure of the name of the church, but it was had beautiful stained glass, and it had a mural in there that one of the visitor center people recommended that we go see. And it was very nice. It was worth seeing. We finished our day in Salisbury. It was getting kind of late, maybe 5:30 or 6, and we knew it would be at least an hour before we got back to Bournemouth, so we had dinner. in Salisbury, took the bus back, and it wasn't that late, but you know, when you've been walking and doing stuff all day, you're tired. So we took care of dinner before we got on the bus and went home. And the next day we walked to the ocean again. We had fish and chips. The first night we got to Bournemouth in a park. We picked them up at a small place and walked back to a park we had gone by. And the seagulls wanted to help us eat the chips mainly. So we had to keep covering them, and that wasn't very relaxing to me, but it was delicious. We walked back to the ocean, and that was always very relaxing to just walk along, you know, and my friend took her shoes and socks off and got in the water. I did not, because I knew it would be cold and I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do it, but I knew it would be cold, so I didn't do it. And we took a bus to Poole, which was kind of like just right there. There was Bournemouth and then there was Poole, and it didn't take too long, and it just seemed like it was a suburb, like they were just two cities kind of merged together. And Poole evidently is the second largest natural harbor in the world. We didn't make it down to the water, but we did hit a bunch of charity shops. We walked along this mall area where there were buildings on both sides, and then a large walkway with no traffic, which was lovely. Didn't have to pay attention to cars or anything. And we went in just about every charity shop we passed, and there were a lot of them. So I picked out a few, you know, things that were small that would fit in my suitcase, and that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that a lot. Later that evening, we just went back to the hotel and we ordered Pizza Hut pizzas, and we ate those and just kind of vegged out. And then the next day, I had arranged to go from Bournemouth to Dublin. I had an Aer Lingus flight, so I took a train from Bournemouth back to Southampton and flew late at night. I didn't get to Dublin till after midnight, but I was excited, and you know, it was no big deal. So that wrapped up my time in England, and it was lovely. It was that last leg here that I've just talked about, seemed more toward the end anyway, when we were in Southampton, when I was in Southampton, and then when we were in Bournemouth, seemed more modern to me. It was more tropical looking. There were lots of palm trees, and it reminded me of California a little bit. And the weather was warmer, which was a welcome relief. It was nice. So I was in England for right at 2 weeks, maybe, yeah, I think it was just right at 2 weeks, and it was a lovely time. So glad I went. And next, I will talk about Ireland in my next video. And I'll see you then.